There's a book that I've been reading. This book is called Mission to Freedom. Uganda Resistance News. It was written between 1981 and 1985. This book was written by Museveni and his friends. I want to quote from this very book. I will read for you a little bit from page 3. It says, and I read, "The right of rebellion against tyranny has been recognized from the most ancient of times to the present day by men of all creeds, ideas, and doctrines. It is part and parcel of the notion of political liberty. It transcends any narrow laws enacted by petty dictators and despots." The right to rebellion transcends any laws enacted by petty dictators and despots, just like Museveni. He goes on to say, the right to rebel against tyranny was at the very root of the American War of Independence against the British imperialism. It was at the root of the French Revolution against divine right and monarchical despotism. It was at the root of many successful anti-colonial wars in countries here in Africa and elsewhere. For example, Algeria, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Angola, and others. Even the normally imperturbable Britons found occasion to invoke this right on a number of occasions. Once at Rudumide, to force King John to sign the Magna Carta, and on other occasions to depose crowned kings like James II and Charles. This golden right was aptly defined by the American Declaration of Independence signed on July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia. Museveni goes on to say, he goes on to quote the Declaration of the American Declaration of Independence, and that was in 1776. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are the right to life, to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter, abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness." Museveni goes on to say, "Indeed, rebellion against tyranny is not only a right, it is a duty for all oppressed people to carry out. The glorious men of the French Revolution stated this truth most aptly in their Declaration of Rights of Man. When a government violates the rights of the people, insurrection is for them the most sacred of rights and most imperative of duty." Muwulire ebigambo bya Museveni. That is Museveni. He says, I'll read this again. The glorious men of the French Revolution stated this truth most aptly in their Declaration of the Rights of Man, that when government violates the rights of the people, insurrection is for them the most sacred of rights and the most imperative of duties. The people of Uganda have invoked this right and arisen to the call of duty and taken up arms against Obote's regime of blood, oppression, and national shame. Then he went ahead to give us a justification of the war. These words were spoken by Museveni when he was our age. They go on to give us a story of 1980. This is in a book written by Museveni. These are his words. Museveni goes on to say, on December 10th, 1980, Ugandans went to the polls. By late afternoon on December 11th, it was clear that UPC and Obote were heading for a resounding defeat, in spite of all the rigging that they had done at earlier stages of registration of voters, nomination of candidates, demarcation of electoral boundaries, etc. The UPC was seized with panic. Paulo Muwanga, at the time Obote's proxy as head of government, took over the powers of the Electoral Commission, and by his decree of December 11th, 1980, the decree stopped the returning officers and the Electoral Commission itself from declaring any results unless such results were personally approved by Muwanga. The decree further directed that all returning officers should not submit their constituency results to the Electoral Commission, but to himself, Paulo Muwanga, Obote's man at the time. A record fine of 70,000 in 1980, that was more than 200 million today. That was the fine imposed by Muwanga for anybody who did not comply with the decree. At a secret meeting throughout the night of December 11th, Obote and Muwanga proceeded to allocate seats to their party cohorts, even those that had not even gotten 10% of the votes. The following day of 12th December 1980, using their control of the national radio, the army, the police, and other state machinery, and backed by the government of Tanzania, Obote and Muwanga announced their coup. One became the president, the other became the vice president and minister for defense. Once again, a minority and unpopular clique was imposed on the people of Uganda, leaving them with no option but to take up arms in defense of the democratic rights. Those are words of Yoweri Museveni in 1980 up to 1985. Do you find any similarity to today? If you only remove the name Obote and put the name Museveni, if you only remove the name Paulo Muwanga and put a name of Byabakama, you'll find that this whole writing becomes fresh again. Fellow Ugandans, we are back to that same point 40 years later. 40 years later, after losing more than 500,000 of our mothers and fathers, we are back to the same place. The same thing, and even worse, is happening today in our generation. So, what is the way forward?